disguise, man. You're gonna be a loser, and I hope to God you die on that floor in a penitentiary, Walker.
Oh, they shot at me. Sir, stand your ground. No retreat.
I'm sorry. Please don't 13 years.
For years, courtrooms claimed nothing could rattle them until the gang leaders arrived.
I'll see you all in hell. Really remember that.
Men who commanded armies on the street stood to hear their final verdict: life in prison, no parole. Some laughed like the sentence was a rumor.
Excuse me, sir. Let the record reflect that the defendant is laughing.
Some erupted, threatening judges and juries. Others froze in a silence more violent than words. Piece by piece, their masks cracked. These are the brutal gang leaders and their reactions when the law finally locked the door behind them. Javon Woolfork. Cell phone footage of your crime playing in court while you sit there denying everything. That's the kind of arrogance Javon Woolfork walked into his trial with. In 2013, Woolfork and 4 other teenagers lured a 16-year-old girl to a house in Hollywood, Florida. What happened next was brutal and calculated. The girl testified that they cornered her, beat her repeatedly, and told her she had to comply with Woolfork or the violence would continue. She begged to leave. They refused. At one point, Woolfork grabbed her by the hair and slammed her head against the concrete. The attack was filmed on cell phones by the other teenagers, capturing every moment of the assault. While his accomplices quickly took plea deals and admitted their roles, Woolfork went to trial. He sat in the interrogation room demanding evidence, challenging detectives to prove anything, acting as though he were untouchable. "Where's the DNA? Where's the evidence?" he repeated, dismissing every accusation thrown at him. In court, he kept up the same act. He argued with the judge, questioned every piece of evidence, and maintained total innocence. Then police presented the cell phone videos taken by his co-defendants. The footage showed exactly what happened inside that house. The beating, the threats, the terror. There was no way to deny it anymore. Woolfork's attitude collapsed instantly. The confidence drained from his face. He shifted from defiance to desperation, pleading with the judge for mercy. "Please help me. Please. I'm not going to throw my life away," he begged. But the judge had already seen enough. During sentencing, Woolfork tried again. "I was 19 at the time. I've been incarcerated for 2 years," he said, as if that somehow balanced the scales. The judge cut through it immediately. The facts and circumstances here were extremely sick and depraved, and that impression hasn't changed. Javon Woolfork was sentenced to 30 years in prison. His pleas, which might have seemed genuine in the moment, came far too late to matter. But if Woolfork's desperate begging fell on deaf ears, what happens when a murderer lashes out at the victim's family in open court? Pedro Espinosa. What does it take for a 19-year-old to smile through a death sentence? To sit in that courtroom knowing the state plans to execute you and smirk like it's all a joke? Pedro Espinosa had that answer, and it terrified everyone who witnessed it. In March 2008, 17-year-old high school football star Jamil Shaw walked home, talking to his girlfriend on the phone. He heard footsteps approaching and someone asked, "What set you from?" Slang for which gang he belonged to. Jamil didn't answer. He wasn't in a gang. Pedro Espinosa pulled the trigger anyway, shooting Shaw in cold blood. Espinosa, an 18th Street gang member, mistook Jamil for a rival because of his red backpack. The cruel irony, Espinosa had been released from prison just 1 day before the murder. At trial, Espinosa's brother testified, but his story unraveled under cross-examination. He claimed Pedro never told him anything about the shooting, but prosecutors caught him in multiple contradictions. He admitted knowing about a Twinkie gang slang for a Rolling 20s member who had been killed. He admitted hearing about it before the police arrived. When pressed, he admitted Pedro had told him details only the killer would know. Didn't you tell the police that Pedro told you he killed a Twinkie that night when you were watching it on the news? The prosecutor asked. I did say that, but that was all a lie. I made it up, the brother insisted. The jury didn't believe him. During sentencing, Jamil's uncle called Espinosa a coward who chose the easiest, deadliest way out instead of facing someone in a fair fight. Then the judge imposed the death sentence. Through every word, every solemn declaration, Espinosa smiled and smirked, completely unbothered. The judge ordered him remanded to San Quentin to await execution pending an automatic appeal. Espinosa showed no remorse, no understanding, no concern. His inappropriate reaction sent a clear message. He simply didn't care. But if smiling at death row seems incomprehensible, what happens when a killer's face shows absolutely nothing at all, not even when a grieving family stands feet away calling him pure evil? Jose Ibara. What kind of predator can stand in a courtroom, hear a mother's heartbreak, and show nothing? No remorse, no fear, not even a flicker of acknowledgement? Jose Ibara had that ability, and it made his crime even more chilling. In February 2024, surveillance cameras at the University of Georgia in Athens captured Ibara moving through an apartment complex. He wasn't wandering. He was searching. Footage shows him going door to door, peering into ground-level bedrooms, circling buildings, and spending a full hour looking for a woman alone. Cameras then picked him up at a nearby bus stop, just steps from the jogging trail. At 9:06 a.m., 22-year-old nursing student Laken Riley ran past that spot. 5 minutes later, she was attacked. Her body was found near a lake. Her skull was fractured, her neck bruised from strangulation. The violence was immediate and overwhelming. The investigation closed in fast. Officers noticed scratches and bruises covering Ibara's hands and arms. Fresh wounds that matched the DNA found under Riley's fingernails. Body camera footage captured police questioning him about the injuries. His excuses were weak. He claimed the cold made him scratch himself, but the officer saw through it instantly. The wounds were fresh, with pus still visible. Surveillance later showed Ibara dumping a jacket that had strands of Riley's hair on it. With the evidence stacked against him, Ibara waived his right to a jury trial entirely. He put his fate in the judge's hands, choosing a bench trial where every brutal detail of his attack was laid out. The judge returned guilty verdicts on all counts and sentenced him to life without the possibility of parole. Ibara didn't react. Not when the decision was read, not when Riley's family stood just feet away and called him a sick, twisted, and evil coward. Not when they described the pain he inflicted or the future he stole. Their voices cracked. Their grief filled the courtroom. But Ibara's face never changed. No remorse, no fear, nothing at all. If Ibara's blank expression was disturbing, imagine a killer who didn't just stay silent but smiled, nodded, and looked satisfied when the judge sentenced him to die behind bars. David Adam Pate. Most killers at least pretend to feel remorse when the judge hands down a life sentence. They hang their heads, they cry, they apologize to the family. David Adam Pate did none of that. Instead, when the judge sentenced him to life in prison, he smiled, nodded his approval, and looked genuinely satisfied, as if the judge had just given him exactly what he wanted. David Adam Pate looked like a nightmare. His tongue had been split down the middle, and Gangster Disciples tattoos covered his neck and face. In October 2013, he lured his friend 33-year-old Ricky James into the woods in Lancaster, South Carolina, and stabbed him multiple times with a butcher knife. When detectives questioned him, Pate confessed, but the details made the room go cold. He said he was too tired and too drunk to dispose of Ricky's body properly, so he just left it there, knowing local children often played in those woods. The next morning he returned, took Ricky's pants and shoes, and tried to clean up the scene. Then came the part that stunned everyone. Pate admitted he enjoyed what he did and said he wanted to do it again. At trial, both the prosecutor and the detective who interrogated him recommended life in prison. He says he'd like to do it again and enjoyed what he did, the detective told the court. Life's the only thing that makes sense here. I just can't explain what we just heard. This is an evil person standing before you. Ricky's two brothers took the stand to confront the killer. One brother broke down mid-sentence, unable to continue. My brother was the type of person who had no strangers. He treated everybody fairly. His only weakness was that he drank, and when he started drinking, he trusted people too much. But besides that, he was a good guy. I hope you give him all he deserves. Let him suffer. People like that ain't supposed to be on earth. As the brothers spoke, Pate interrupted them, shouting about God being avenging as if scripture could justify what he'd done. The judge described the murder as senseless, remorseless, and completely devoid of emotion. Then he imposed the sentence: life in prison. David Pate didn't flinch. He didn't argue. He didn't apologize. He smiled and nodded as if he were satisfied with the outcome. While Pate smiled at spending life behind bars, what happens when three gang members show zero remorse together and one of them grins through the entire sentencing like it's entertainment? Hoolies gang. What does it say about someone when they grin through a murder trial? Not nervousness, not shock, but genuine amusement, as if the deaths, the tears, and the shattered families mean absolutely nothing? Hockey Artist had that reaction, and it revealed just how far gone he really was. The violence started years earlier. In December 2018, Travis Scott, a leader of the Hoolies gang in Brooklyn, gunned down 35-year-old Tyne Walker as he walked home. Then in March 2020, Deshawn Austin shot and killed a 26-year-old rival outside a strip club. 4 months later, Austin and fellow gang member Hockey Artist took the violence to another level. On a summer afternoon, they walked toward a neighborhood playground where children were running around, parents were grilling, and a stroller sat beside a picnic table. Without hesitation, they opened fire. Surveillance video captured both men unloading round after round into the crowd. 4 people were hit. 1-year-old Devil Gardner was struck by a stray bullet and died. Prosecutors described Austin as someone with the blood of 5 people on his hands, a man who walked up to a playground and fired shot after shot without even looking at who he was hitting. The evidence was overwhelming. All 3 gang members were convicted. Sentencing revealed exactly who these men were. Austin sat staring straight ahead, refusing to acknowledge the families he destroyed or offer any apology. Travis Scott glared at Tyne Walker's relatives as they delivered their victim impact statements. Walker's family begged him to explain why he didn't just go home to his own child instead of taking someone else's. Scott showed nothing. Hockey Artist grinned throughout the entire proceeding as if the violence, the tears, and the shattered families meant nothing to him. But when the judge sentenced him to 40 years to life, the mask came off. Artist exploded, yelling at the judge as deputies dragged him from the courtroom. In the end, Deshawn Austin received 50 years to life. Travis Scott and Hockey Artist each got 40 years to life. If grinning through a sentencing seems unfathomable, what happens when a killer doesn't just disrespect the court but directly confronts the victim's family? Deshawn Boland. The victim's family sat quietly in the courtroom gallery, grief carved across their faces, simply watching the proceedings. That's all they did, just watched. But Deshawn Boland couldn't handle being looked at by the people he'd destroyed, and his reaction revealed just how detached from reality he really was. Surveillance footage outside a Muskegon Heights, Michigan bar caught Boland stealing a car from the parking lot. Jacob Ramos saw his brother's vehicle being taken, threw off his jacket, jumped on his motorcycle, and chased after the thief. What Jacob didn't know was that Boland's accomplice, Robert G., was following him in another car. G leaned entirely out of the window, aimed at Jacob, and shot him in the back. The bullet sent Jacob crashing off his motorcycle into a nearby yard. A witness called 911 immediately, and others rushed to help, but it was too late. Jacob took his last breath before paramedics arrived. G was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life without parole. The focus then shifted to Boland, whose courtroom behavior made everything worse. During a preliminary hearing, he erupted in anger and had to be physically removed. At a later appearance, as Jacob's family sat quietly in the gallery, Boland stood up without permission and started pacing. He confronted the family directly, telling them to stop looking at him. "Stop looking at me, bro. I'm not playing." The evidence left no doubt. Boland was convicted of first-degree murder and perpetration of a larceny. The judge sentenced him to life in prison without parole. But Boland's outburst was just one man losing control. What happens when a decorated prosecutor with 42 years of experience says he's never encountered anyone as dangerous as the defendant sitting in that courtroom? Lance Bronco. What does it mean when a prosecutor with 4 decades of experience, someone who's seen the worst humanity has to offer, looks at a defendant and says he's the most dangerous person he's ever encountered? That's exactly what happened with 23-year-old Lance Bronco, and those words carried a weight that silenced the entire Idaho courtroom. In March 2024, Bronco broke into the Idaho Falls home of 51-year-old Eric Lee. Convinced drugs were hidden inside, he had the wrong house. Within moments, Bronco opened fire, killing Lee and injuring his son. The senselessness shocked investigators, especially when they learned Bronco was already on federal supervised release with an active warrant for earlier assaults. Because Idaho has the death penalty, prosecutors had leverage. Bronco accepted a plea deal, guilty to first-degree murder in exchange for removing the death penalty. The state recommended life with 35 years fixed before parole eligibility. At sentencing, his defense attorney argued for the minimum, describing Bronco's childhood trauma, mental health struggles, PTSD, and years in juvenile prison starting at age 13. The attorney claimed Bronco still had hope for rehabilitation and wanted to make things right. The prosecutor destroyed that argument immediately. He told the court this wasn't about protecting the community today or tomorrow. It was about protecting children being born now, children who would grow up, become adults, and have families of their own, long before Bronco would ever be eligible for release. Then came the assessment that silenced the room. When it comes to the sentencing of somebody who is as dangerous as Lance Bronco, I'm not sure in 42 years I've encountered somebody as dangerous. He told the judge there was no reasonable expectation that Bronco's risk for violence would ever decrease. When given a chance to speak, Bronco offered no excuses. "The only thing I want to say is I accept responsibility for whatever you give me," he said. The judge sentenced him to 35 years to life for first-degree murder. While Bronco quietly accepted being labeled the most dangerous, imagine a rising rap star ambushed outside a motorcycle dealership, killed in broad daylight for the cash in his bag, and the killers showing zero remorse when sentenced to life. Javon Woolfork. A rising rap star, $50,000 in cash, and 4 armed men who decided his life was worth less than the money in his bag. When Javon Woolfork, known to millions as XXXTentacion, was gunned down in broad daylight, the killer's reactions to their life sentences revealed just how little his fame meant to them. On June 18, 2018, a 20-year-old Woolfork was out shopping for a motorcycle with his uncle in South Florida. Earlier that day, he'd withdrawn about $50,000 from the bank to make his purchase. What he didn't know was that he was being stalked by 4 men: Michael Boatwright, Trayvon Newsom, Dedrick Williams, and Robert Allen. Williams and Allen followed Onfroy into the dealership to confirm it was actually the rapper, then signaled to the others. As Onfroy left the shop and got into his BMW, a black SUV intercepted him at the exit. Boatwright and Newsom stepped out, faces covered with masks, guns drawn. A struggle broke out inside the BMW. Onfroy fought back, but Boatwright opened fire, shooting the rapper multiple times. They grabbed his bag of cash and fled, leaving Onfroy slumped in the driver's seat. A passerby filmed the immediate aftermath and called 911. The video showed Onfroy's lifeless body still in the car. The hip-hop world went into shock, with artists like Diplo and J. Cole paying tribute to the young star whose career was just beginning. Shortly after, all 4 men were arrested and charged with first-degree murder and armed robbery. Robert Allen took a plea deal in exchange for his testimony against the other 3, which became the key to securing convictions. The trial began with prosecutors arguing the murder was pre-planned and efficient. The defense tried to discredit Allen, suggesting he would lie to save himself. Boatwright's lawyer even made the bizarre claim that rapper Drake should have been investigated, citing old social media posts where Onfroy had joked, "If anybody kills me, it's Drake." The jury didn't buy it. The evidence was overwhelming. CCTV footage from the crime scene, surveillance showing the defendants posing and dancing with the stolen money hours after the murder, and Allen's testimony that Newsom grabbed the bag while Boatwright shot Onfroy. The jury convicted all 3. Michael Boatwright received life in prison plus an additional 30 years for pulling the trigger. Trayvon Newsom and Dedrick Williams were each sentenced to life without parole. Robert Allen, who testified for the prosecution, received a reduced sentence of 7 years, plus 20 years of probation. While Onfroy's killers showed no remorse for murdering a rising star, imagine a courtroom where the chaos isn't just from the defendant, but from the lawyers, the witnesses, and even the judge himself. Jeffrey Williams. Most trials have an order. Lawyers follow procedure, witnesses tell their stories, and judges maintain control. But Jeffrey Williams's RICO trial in Georgia became one of the most chaotic, bizarre, and drawn-out proceedings in recent memory, where courtroom meltdowns, drug-influenced testimony, and constant interruptions turned justice into a spectacle. Jeffrey Williams, better known by his stage name Young Thug, was accused of being a founding member of the criminal gang Young Slime Life, or YSL. Prosecutors claimed Williams and YSL had ties to the Bloods gang. In May 2022, he was arrested and charged with gang-related offenses under Georgia's RICO Act, the same law used to take down mobsters. Prosecutors used Williams' own song lyrics as evidence, arguing they proved his gang involvement. He's not using gangs colloquially. The evidence will show he's telling you they are a gang, they claimed. The defense fired back, insisting the lyrics were taken out of context. These are lyrics that rhyme, taken out of context. If we're going to criminalize lyrics, we should all watch what we say. They're studio gangsters creating music for us to listen to. They even argued that Thug actually stood for truly humble under God. But the trial quickly spiraled into chaos. Judge Ural Glanville, prosecutor Adrienne Love, and defense attorney Brian Steele clashed repeatedly. At one point, when the defense failed to follow instructions, the judge scolded them. "You all don't listen to the court, and it's going to get you all in a lot of hot water. You need to listen to me when I tell you something." The arguments escalated. During one heated exchange, a bailiff had to step in when attorneys from both sides started shouting over each other. The judge grew visibly frustrated. The defense wasn't much better. Steele accused the prosecutor of lying directly to the judge's face and demanded the judge recuse himself, asking for an apology for being yelled at in front of the jury. The judge refused. Then the witnesses made things worse. One witness erupted on the stand during cross-examination, shouting, "I really don't understand what's going on. My head hurts. Keep asking me questions about this. Keep asking me questions about that." Then he made a shocking confession. "Can I get some water? I'm so high right now, y'all. I'm about to go to sleep on y'all." Another witness admitted prosecutors had been harassing her for months and she didn't want to be there. Even the jury couldn't escape the madness. One juror was held in contempt for secretly recording courtroom proceedings. Another took off on vacation instead of showing up. A third was caught asking the media about the trial. The trial continues to drag on with no clear end in sight, and Williams remains in custody awaiting a verdict. Caius Veiovis. What kind of fury does it take to stand in a courtroom and curse 12 strangers, promising to see them all in hell? Caius Veiovis didn't just reject his verdict. He exploded with a rage so raw and disturbing it left the entire Massachusetts courtroom stunned into silence. Veiovis's appearance was terrifying. 6 horns surgically implanted in his forehead framed a face hardened by violence. In August 2011, he teamed up with Hell's Angels member Adam Lee Hall and David Shalhoub to kidnap 3 men who were potential witnesses in Hall's trial in Springfield, Massachusetts. The murders were brutal. David Glasser, Edward Frampton, and Robert Chadwell were abducted and driven to a remote location in Berkshire County. They were killed by cutting, stabbing, and shooting. Their bodies were dismembered. Investigators found the remains buried 10 days later. Veiovis wanted into the Hell's Angels faction, and helping execute these murders was his way in. Prosecutors explained that Glasser was killed to prevent testimony, while the other 2 were eliminated as witnesses. Hall and Shalhoub were convicted and sentenced to life without parole. When the jury returned Veiovis's verdict, chaos erupted. He shouted at them, "I'll see you all in hell. Remember that, every one of you, I'll see you in hell." His threats and raw fury disrupted the courtroom. During sentencing, Veiovis insisted police initially didn't believe he was involved but tried to squeeze him for information. "My hand was not in this, and I will not let this man sell me for the price of my integrity. I'd rather spend the rest of my life in prison," he declared. His final words cut through the room. "My hand wasn't in this. But if anybody thinks I'm going to hang my head today and beg for mercy, they're just as deluded in their thinking as that jury who convicted me." The judge imposed 3 consecutive life sentences without parole. Veiovis's dreams of gang membership ended in permanent imprisonment. If Veiovis's fury shook the courtroom, imagine the horror when 5 gang members mistake an innocent teenager for a rival and butcher him with machetes in broad daylight while witnesses watched helplessly. Trinitarios gang. Sentences are supposed to be somber. It's the moment when killers face the consequences of destroying lives, where families finally see justice delivered. But when 5 Trinitarios gang members learned their fate for butchering a 15-year-old boy, they didn't bow their heads in shame. They waved gang signs and shouted slogans, turning their murder sentencing into a gang rally. On June 20th, 2018, in the Bronx, 15-year-old Leandro Guzman Feliz went to meet a friend just blocks from his apartment. 4 cars suddenly appeared, filled with members of the Trinitarios gang. Mistaking Leandro for a rival, they chased him through the streets. Surveillance footage captured his desperate attempt to escape. Leandro ran into a bodega and hid behind the counter. The moment a gang member spotted him, a scuffle broke out. They dragged him back outside, where 5 gang members, Jonaiki Martinez Estrella, Manuel Rivera, Elvin Garcia, Jose Munoz, and Antonio Santiago, took turns stabbing him with large knives and machetes in the middle of the street. After the attack, Leandro staggered back into the bodega, but the workers sent him away. Outside, fading fast, he gestured to onlookers to call 911. Then he started running toward St. Barnabas Hospital, just 1 block away. He collapsed at the entrance. Passers-by desperately tried to save him while 2 police officers stood nearby watching. The officers were later investigated for failing to act. 20 minutes later, Leandro died from a fatal stab wound to his neck. Police used CCTV footage to identify and arrest all 5 attackers. Each was charged with first-degree murder. A 6th gang member, Kevin Alvarez, who helped drag Leandro from the bodega, testified against his accomplices in exchange for lesser charges. The jury convicted all 5. At sentencing, they showed 0 remorse. Instead, they waved gang signs and shouted gang slogans in court. Estrella, who delivered the fatal blow, received life without parole. Munoz, Garcia, and Santiago each got 25 years to life. Rivera was sentenced to 23 years to life. Russell Burl. How does a 16-year-old react when told he'll spend every single year of his adult life behind bars? Does he break down? Does he beg? Russell Burl did neither, and that cold, emotionless acceptance might be the most disturbing reaction of all. In July 2012 in Providence, Rhode Island, Burl and 3 accomplices broke into a home with one purpose: robbery. They specifically targeted Michael Martin, calling him soft and expecting him to have marijuana and cash. Their planning was cold and calculated. The attack was swift and brutal. Burl pulled the trigger multiple times, killing Michael Martin and Damen Colon in the kitchen. Shemika Barros woke from the living room couch at the sound of gunfire. Burl's bullet struck her as well, with 3 people dead. The robbery is complete. In court, the prosecutor emphasized the methodical nature of the crime. There was a discussion among all of them about the fact that Michael Martin was soft, and that those present thought Mr. Martin would be an easy target for a robbery. Burl eventually pleaded guilty to all 3 murders. At sentencing, the judge imposed 4 consecutive life terms in prison. Burl would spend every year of his adult life behind bars for crimes committed at 16. His accomplice, Malik Merchant, who acted as a lookout, received 17 years. The getaway driver, Jimmy Scales, a member of the Gangster Disciples, was sentenced to 25 years. 4 consecutive life sentences were handed to a 16-year-old who showed nothing. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.